This is the IT Career Roadmap. I'm your host, DJ Eshelman.
Introducing the IT Career Roadmap Workshop. With a single investment, you will gain access to both live workshops and course materials every single year.
But I wasn't really paying attention to my pathway, and I ended up homeless. So even though I was working in information technology, I had this lull period in my life where I ended up living out of my car. And so this 2001 a Subaru Forester was my home for a couple months while I figured things out. I ended up maintaining about, I think at my peak, I was at 11 different Citrix environments that I was running around and maintaining for these other customers, that sort of thing. And so that's basically what I did first. But then I eventually noticed that was really not going anywhere. And fast forward a little bit to 2010, 2011 timeframe. And I started working as a resident Citrix consultant with consulting. So my job was not only to be part of projects and the deployment aspect of things, but I was also now mentoring others that were coming on board. So whatever background they were in, they made them into future Citrix employees, basically. And then they would send them out on the road with me to discover if they would be good as consultants. And so I had basically junior consultants under me for several years that I did this. And ultimately, I've gone on to start writing books and do things like this. And I just said, wow, this is amazing. I don't have to stay where I am. I can figure out what works in my life. But the big lesson here is that I really wish I would have had an actual plan. That's what that looked like.
Are you feeling stuck in your information technology career, just beginning your journey and feeling clueless, thinking it's too late to make a change? You're not alone, and it's not your fault. You've been taught for years that there is a limited career path in information technology, and you've been stuck in it. But don't despair, there's a solution. DJ Eshelman has helped hundreds of others to realize that they can have a successful and fulfilling IT career, and he'll help you too. He'll provide you with the roadmap you need to make the right changes and find success in a career you love.
I was not making much, and even though I was working in technology, and granted, inflation is a thing, right? But the honest truth is, this kind of maps out to current dollars just as well. I wasn't really focused, and so what I was doing was what I could. In other words, I was just doing what was ever handed to me or I could find online. I was jumping from job to job, from 2000 to about. The reality is that led to a couple of different things. One is that I started to see some income growth, but also it started to grow me as a professional, and I started to see what was possible. And I started to see that my work didn't just have to be a 9-to-5 kind of a thing. I could really be more flexible. I was traveling a lot, so I was getting a lot of points and things like that. But when I was doing consulting work independently, I found that I was able to control my schedule a lot better. So that's exactly what I did. I went back into that world of doing consulting work. And what I did was I leaned into it and said, what if we can expect more? And so I started charging more for my worth. I started actually working less.
Find your ideal information technology career archetype, the unique combination of how you like to work, where, why, and when, and why that is crucial to your career path.
When we made him in our story, he's still on call for support, but he's also doing these other things. And so he's blending his role where he's still doing a lot of the networking and infrastructure projects, and he's learning how to do VDI at the same time and figuring out what solution is going to work best and working with them on that. A lot of times a meeting will go on longer or shorter, or you'll get in a hallway conversation where it takes up more of your time. And so I want you to be able to log all this from a practical standpoint. So the first thing is things are just labor. This is where a lot of times people get stuck in this mode where they just labor at things because they're told to. These are the kind of things that you're not really passionate about. These things that you're doing because you were told to, or you have to, or it's required of you, but it's not necessarily anything you're have any kind of notion towards being good at. But the reality is we need to disconnect that victim mentality of that and say, this is something that I'm doing for a reason. We're connected with that. The next area that I want to really bring out is those areas of talents. These are areas that you have a natural proclivity towards. You just feel that they come easy for you. And you know what? I believe fully that we all have these things that just come naturally to us. Those become passions that you pursue. And ultimately, what I want people to be doing is spending more time in those areas of passion than they are of talents, tasks, and labors. So let's go through exercise number 1. And this is what we call pursuit mapping. This is where we are going to map out how you spent your time for the last week or so. Let's give an example. So let's look through Andrew's day again. And let's see how he mapped this out when working with his coach. So we have the same time frames, the same kind of things. This is something that actually became natural for him. He did it without thinking. And that's because it's one of his talents, is noticing how people work together and which ones would be best for what. It's somewhat of a management trait, but you'll see later that it's also a bit of a leadership trait. But what we'll do here is I want to go over this exercise about mapping your talents. And so what we're going to do, and we're going to go through a quick little exercise, this is really about the rest of your life. It isn't just about your work. I want you to make very clear about that. And so what I want you to do is in the next page in the worksheet, you're going to see 4 areas here. You'll see your labor, tasks, talents, and passions. If you've ever done coaching with me before, you probably know that I like mapping these out and being very honest with yourself about them. I'm going to demonstrate why this is important. So as you saw in originally my career progression, you saw that I was really doing things that were initially I was voluntold to do. So what happened here is that Citrix was originally in the area of tasks for me. It's something I was voluntold to do. Well, then I started noticing, you know what, this works for people. I want to tell you a quick story about this. So when I first started, I think it was like my second or third Citrix deployment that I was actually really a part of. It was one that I inherited, and y'all, it was awful. It was done by this medical vendor that didn't really know what they were doing. And I just had this notion that it could be better. And she just gives me this big old hug. DJ, I was able to tuck my kids in last night. I haven't been able to do that in a year and a half. Y'all, this just went into a passion area. I had connected with a person and a why this was all happening. And so now all of a sudden, I'm excited about this. And for me, it's become much more of a wider area. And so then in 2017 is when I wrote Just Do This. That's when the main manuscript was created. I tell people as a warning that books sometimes are not necessarily in and of themselves a great financial thing. So I invested about, I would say, between $15,000 and $20,000 on myself. I'll give you an example. There was someone that I coached at one point that was very much into the Citrix space and this sort of thing, and really discovered that in the course of coaching that, you know what, they weren't really passionate about it. What they loved was working on projects at their house. What they loved was making their house better. So one of the things that I wanted them to explore is, should you flip this around? Citrix and all that kind of work be something you do in the background, but your actual job, what you're passionate about, is flipping houses, for example. So that may not mean that you do all your work in flipping houses. That may not be what you spend 100% of your time on, but it is where your mental focus is. It is where you want to develop into. And maybe you have some things you do as talents or tasks along the way to help get you there, but you're not supposed to. This area right here, talents, that's what I call the money zone for a lot of people. Again, I want you to be really honest about what you really want here. I want you to be honest and say, do I want more of things like money, time, flexibility? What do I want less of? Do I want less responsibility, less stress? Maybe I want more notoriety. Maybe I want more respect. A lot of times, what plan is following success? And as I said before, you have to be really honest with yourself about what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy.
No two paths are the same, but as they say, success leaves clues. You'll spend a few moments with an array of archetypes and see what their daily lives look like and the career pathway that got them there. You'll leave more confident in your chosen path.
This happens a lot. People don't realize this. Is a lot of times people start off in a service desk and they get promoted within that service desk. And they find themselves on a management track because they're good at managing resources, managing people and schedules and things like that. And they just have a natural proclivity towards that. So the progression for some might be starting in the cubicle. And then all of a sudden you have an office. And then you have a corner office. That might be a way to say your career is progressing. Or sometimes you might start off the cubicle and then you're like me and you end up jet setting. So let's go into Andrew's plan here. Let's see what he enjoyed and didn't enjoy. So he said that he's not so much enjoying, oddly enough, just the blind building tasks like the updating machines and things like that, all the updates and all the assigning users to groups and blah, 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 all those kind of things that are some people find really cool because they can go home and not think about it anymore at the end of the day. And so there's a character in the book called Jay that is a coaching consultant. And so Andrew's engaging with him to figure out what his career path should look like, what things to focus in on. Let's get into our next session of doing some general brainstorming. So here's what we're going to do. So basically, to give an example, Andrew's pathway might be like year one of this journey with him. He's going into being a desktop engineer. So he knows he needs to pursue more architect level skills eventually. So he's getting through some education. He's doing some things that are giving him the skills that he needs in and out of the technology. Look backwards. Look back on where you built to get to where you are now. Write that down and really lean into this a little bit. And for the next few minutes, I want you to do that. Just look at once you've mapped out all those pursuit areas and the connections and all that kind of stuff, look at your roadmap and say, okay, where do I want to be?
Special guests will bring you interesting perspectives.
Then you'd be like hiring a recruiting agent, or what does that look like?
No, definitely don't. You want to work with recruiting agents, but normally you don't hire a recruiting agent. Usually if you're working with someone like myself who's specialized, they can open some doors to you.
Now we have some directions we can go. Now, what happens typically with people is they get stuck. We're talking mindset kind of things here. And so what keeps you stuck is limiting beliefs. But what I hear people say all the time is my situation is different. DJ, I'm in a different place than you are. But DJ, you just don't get it. But DJ, the thing is, my situation is different. Or you might say, I don't have the skills that I need to do that. I'm missing something. I don't have the certifications. Or I hear this one all the time. All the good jobs are taken. What would come out of this was that you fall in love. You don't get in love. You don't achieve in love. You fall in love. Right? You don't say things like, DJ, that's easy for you to say because blah, blah, blah. Or my situation is different because you're dating this person, that person, and something there. We talked earlier about those pursuits. And so when you get to that point where that pursuit of passion is there, then you start to look at what does that look like in a position? What does that look like? Whether that's a job posting, a job title, or just an orientation, whatever that is, what does that actually look like? But if you're stuck in an area you don't want to be, then you have a problem. So that is the mentality I had. Unfortunately, I still had that mentality in 2003 when I was living out of my car, and I thought it was no way it could get much better, but I really didn't see how it was going to get much worse. Let's fast forward to these days, and I have a car and a home, not a car that is all, right? And so this all came about through me embracing what I call the hard story here. I actually got into the technology that made me happy, but also the way I could relate that technology to people that made others happy as well. And so it really was a matter of, look, this is possible. So this is a picture of my 2015 BMW that I paid for in cash. When you stop the comparison trap, and you realize that it's okay to just get with an avatar and look at those clues that their successes has left and take on what makes sense for you and reject the things that don't, you can create your own pathway.
Few people get to their ideal vocation by chance. It takes planning. You'll leave with an actionable plan for the next few years of your vocational pathway. Make this part of every year's planning process with one single investment.